So I got this comment that asked if I had to choose between a clicker press and a laser cutter for Leathercraft, which one would I go with and why? Now, I do have a strong opinion, and you can kind of guess laser cutter, but it may not be for the reason that you think. My name's Adam. I'm the owner and artisan here at 80 Proof Goods. I started this business about 3 years ago, actually 3 years ago this month. So I picked up a couple of things over the time that I'd like to share with you in terms of machines, efficiencies, production, things like that. Now, I have two glowforges. I have a glowforge basic and a glowforge pro. I've had them for a couple of years now, and they're tremendous at increasing my production efficiency. I'm pumping out numbers. I'm able to scale my business. So ultimately, if you're hand cutting everything, you just can't scale your business that way. So at some point in time, you're gonna have to make a decision on whether you're gonna want a laser or a clicker press, and I'm sure there's other methods out there, but these are the two main ones that are kind of taking over the Leathercraft world. Now I'm gonna go through some pros and cons of each, make your decision on your own. I'll give you my opinions, so let's get into it. The first thing I wanna touch on here is efficiency and production. Now, when it comes to the laser, all you really have to do is put your pattern into the software and you laser cut and you go. If you want to make changes to your pattern, you can do so at any time on your own and get it done the same day. If you're prototyping a new product, if you have new product ideas, a laser cutter is going to be better and more efficient. You can do things quicker. You can learn from your mistakes, you can make adjustments, and you can get things kind of moving that way. If you're using a clicker press, you can't really prototype with a clicker press. You have to finalize your design first. Send your pattern, your digital pattern, out to somebody to make a clicker press die. They're gonna make it out of steel. They'll send it back to you and you can use that to cut out your leather with your clicker press. So prototyping, new designs, changing things up on the fly, you can't do with a clicker press, only a laser cutter, or by hand. Like I said, you can't really scale up by hand. So being able to use a laser cutter for prototyping and making new designs, making changes, it's a really good way to go. It also comes into play if you're someone who's a leathercrafter taking custom orders. Now, I very rarely take custom orders because I focus on the products that I design for my store. If you're somebody whose leathercraft business model is pretty much centered around taking on custom orders, say you make custom knife sheaths or gun holsters or different notebooks for different size notebooks that people have or things like that, a laser cutter is going to be great because you can make those changes to your current designs or design new ones completely and just go same day. If you're somebody who makes custom orders, a clicker press not going to be for you because you can't make a custom order, have it sent out to a clicker press die, have it sent back. It's not cost efficient, it's not time efficient, it's just not going to work that way. So production time, laser cutter is going to be more efficient designs and just sticking to them, and that's kind of what you do. I love the laser cutter for my most popular product, my watch bands. Now I make watch bands, you can see me, I'm wearing one right here. They're pretty small, very low profile, which means in the glowforge laser bed, which is pretty small, I can cut like 20 watch bands at once. If you're using a clicker press, unless you have multiple dies made, which you're probably not gonna, you're probably gonna make one of each. You have to one at a time. So you're gonna be sitting there punching, move it, punch it, move it, punch it, move it, punch it. And you're gonna be doing that over and over again. The laser, I set it up, hit go. It might be 15 minutes to cut 20 watch bands. It's about a minute and a half each for the watch bands. It's super easy, and while it's cutting, I can go do other things. So for example, if I'm making a tote bag, I make tote bags by hand. I might hit go on 20 watch bands and make a tote bag in the meantime and come back and that's done. And you can really keep things moving. It makes things super efficient. With a clicker press, you have to stand there clicking every single one of them out. So again, it really depends on what kind of products you're making. Now, one thing about the laser is that there is trial and error. So the next chapter here is kind of about the learning curve. Laser cutters have a pretty heavy learning curve in the beginning. You might use a lot of different kinds of leather, in which case you're gonna have to dial in a lot of different settings for the laser. You have to determine the power of the laser, the speed of the laser, the depth of the laser, the width of the materials, how many passes you want it to take. Those are things that you kind of aren't gonna know up front. Now, companies like Glowforge make their own proof grade materials, but if you're any real serious leather crafter, you're not using proof grade materials. You're using full grain leather, really good leather that you get from reputable suppliers like Rocky Mountain Leather Supply, Acadia Leather, Horween, things like that. So when it comes to laser cutting, you have to get your leather, you have to sacrifice a test piece of that leather, so you're gonna have to lose a little bit of it, you're gonna use scraps to dial in the settings. Settings can go wrong. If the mirror is dirty, if the camera's dirty, it kind of throws off all the settings and it might not cut properly. You might cut a project and it might not cut all the way through. There's definite trial and error that come along with a laser. Now, I've been, like I said, I've been using my laser for 2 years. I have all of my settings saved. I know exactly what I'm doing. I use the same leather for all of my products all the time. I very rarely get a new piece of leather in, and when I do, it's a super limited edition run, so I only have to worry about dialing new settings in once a month or once every couple of months. It's really rare. So if you're someone who sticks with a set kind of leather, type of leather. For me, I use the Minerva series from Battleassi Carlo in Italy. I get from Rocky Mountain Leather Supply. I know what settings to use for my weight of leather. If you use different weights of leather, you have to dial in different weights of settings for the laser. So something to keep in mind. On the contrary, a clicker press, once you have your die cut, if you have somebody make you a leather die, say you're making a wallet, you get your wallet die made for the clicker press. Doesn't matter what kind of leather you use. You're going to set your leather up, put the die on top of it, punch it out, and you're good to go. I'm pretty sure all of the clicker presses will cut through most leather weights. I don't particularly know those like 1-ton presses. I don't think that you're going to have an issue cutting through heavy weights of leather. I could be wrong. I don't have a clicker press, but from my understanding, they have a lot of the hydraulic presses that they'll get it done. So it doesn't really discriminate on any kind of leather. There's almost no learning curve. As long as you have your clicker die made, you can cut through anything, anytime you want. Laser takes a little bit more upfront trial and error, upfront testing and settings dialing in for you to get it right. But once you do, it's super fast. Let's talk about maintenance. A clicker press, as far as I know, doesn't require too much maintenance. It's a pretty stationary machine. There's a hydraulic press, so you might have to oil it, clean it, whatever that case may be, but it's pretty easy. You just click things out. Really, the only maintenance is making sure that you're getting all your patterns made from die makers, which is a cost after the fact, which I'll get to in just a minute. The laser, a little bit more maintenance is required. You're not cleaning the laser, you're cleaning the mirrors and the camera in the laser. If the mirrors get dirty, the camera sees the bed image, the lasers use mirrors that shoot back and forth to make sure it's getting precise imaging, to make sure it's hitting exactly where it needs to be hitting, to make sure it's laser precise. So every now and then you take a lens wipe, really simple lens wipe, and just clean off things. I think they recommend every 40 hours of running your laser, you clean it. Or do a deep clean, depending on what you're cutting, how often you're cutting. It could be once a week, it could be once a month. I clean my lasers about once a week just to make sure everything's precise. And you get to know when it's not precise. Smell is something to keep in mind with a laser. You're gonna have to vent it out the window. So there are some products that are vents that you kind of do internally. So you might have a big air purifier box that you can vent into inside the house so it doesn't vent outside. Those are really good for people who live in apartments. So if you live in an apartment, a laser cutter is going to be a little bit tougher. It's going to have more costs because you want to get something that vents inside instead of out your window. Cutting leather with a laser smells. And if you're not venting properly, it can be really overwhelming. It can be really unhealthy for you to breathe. So you want to make sure you're doing it properly. You can see to my right here, that's my vent. It's really ugly. We just moved into a new shop a couple months ago. I haven't put a ton of effort into making this pretty, but again, I don't really care. It's a working workshop. If I'm outside and it's venting, it stinks. So if you're close to your neighbors, if you live in a row home, if you live in a townhouse, if you live in a city where it's, everybody's kind of close knit, your neighbors might not love you. So that's something to keep in mind. Luckily, I'm sitting on an acre. I'm blessed to have a little bit more room to my left and right. My neighbors are a little bit spaced out, so I don't have to worry about it, but it's something to keep in mind depending on your personal environment. Clicker press, obviously no scent. Click, done. Let's talk about price. Price is a pretty heavy factor when it comes to this discussion, so I saved it for last. Laser cutters are expensive, several $1,000s. Glowforges are on the top end of that expense. A lot of controversy comes with glowforges, but laser cutters in general, a couple $1,000s. You have a finite amount of space in your bed. The glowforge bed is about, I think, 12 by 20. I have a glowforge Pro, which is off camera here, so I can cut infinite length, but it takes a little bit of effort and time and practice. So there's a limitation to the bed size. But the cost around a couple $1,000s. My glowforge basic, I think, was $3,000, $3,500. The Pro is about $5,000, $5,500. Heavy shipping costs come along with that, which I'm sure also comes along with the clicker press. So the price for lasers expensive, but in my experience, which I've had lasers for a couple of years now, it's a one-time fee. I paid for the laser once, never paid for anything again. Laser's good, it works, nothing's broken, thank God. Clicker press, on the other hand, cheaper up front, still a couple thousand, but less than a laser. But you're paying cheaper up front, but more cost over the long term in increments. So you have incremental costs over time. So you'll get the clicker press, but if you just buy a clicker press, you're not done. You have to buy your clicker dies. So you have to send your patterns out, like I said. So it's cheaper up front, but you're going to be spending money over the long term with every product that you design. And you have to take time to finalize it. So you still have to cut it by hand, make sure it's perfect, prototype it that way, and then send it out to get clicker die cut. So Cost up front, cheaper, costs a little bit more over the long run. Laser cutter is more expensive up front, not too much to do after the fact. If a laser cutter breaks, if there's damage to it, if something goes wrong, if there's a defect, or if something breaks, which, look, it's a machine, over time something's going to happen. You might have to send the laser out completely to get fixed. Glowforge requires a lot of that to be packaged up in the same package that it was sent in, so you have to store your box for years. There's pros and cons there with the price. So kind of to wrap things up here, I'm the type of person who likes to do things on the fly. I'll give you an example. I make a notebook cover for a 5x8.25 notebook. I occasionally get requests for like, hey, can you make the same notebook cover but for an A5 size, which I think is 5.25 by 8. It's just flipped. So my cover would not fit. That means I have to go into Illustrator. I can very quickly resize the dimensions and laser cut it within 10 minutes of getting that request. With a clicker press, you can't do that. You don't have your clicker die made for the new size, so you have to do it by hand. So clicker dies aren't for people who take custom requests. They aren't for people who make changes on the fly. They're not for prototyping. They're for finalized products. Things that you want to make in a production line. You can punch things out quickly. Ultimately, it's going to come down to what type of business model you have. Are you looking to scale up production using kind of the same product over and over again? Do you have a lot of different products that you might want to change up on the fly? Clicker press, laser cutter, pros and cons. You have to decide for yourself. I'm a fan of the laser cutters. I think the cost pays for itself tenfold over the years that I've had it. I think they've paid themselves off tremendously. But a clicker press has its places. With that said, drop a comment below. Let me know what you think, which one better fits your personal business model. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next one.